It's story time with Baby Yo. Today, for Lou, we are reading this book, Misty Chincoteague, right, from Marguerite Henry. So I don't own any copyrights to this book. I will link it on Amazon link below so that you too can buy it. Okay, Baby Yo, you ready? You excited for story time? Yeah. Are you gonna dance? Yes. Okay. So let's see. Part 1. Before Misty. Chapter 1. Live Cargo. A wild, ringing neigh shrilled up from the hold of the Spanish galleon. It was not the cry of an animal in hunger. It was a terrifying bugle, an alarm call. The captain of Santo Cristo strode up the poop deck. Cursed be that stallion, he muttered under his breath as he stomped forward and backwards, forward and back. And suddenly he stopped short. The wind. It was dying with the sun. It was spilling out of the sails, causing them to quiver and shake. He could feel his flesh creep with the sails. Without wind, he could not get to Panama, and if he did not get there, and get there soon, he was headed for trouble. The more ponies would be delivered to the Vicary of Peru, and they could not be kept alive much longer. Their hay had grown musty. The water casks were almost empty, and now this sudden calm, this heavy warning of a storm. He plucked nervously at his rusty black beard, as if that would help him think. "We lie in the latitude of white squalls," he said, looking with vexation on his face. "When the wind does strike, it will strike with fury." His steps quickened. "We must shorten the sail." He made up his mind. Cupping his hands to his mouth, he bellowed orders. "Furl the topgallant sail! Furl the coursers and the main topsail! Shorten the fore topsail!" The ship burst into action. From forward and aft, all hands came running. They fell to work furiously, carrying out orders. The captain's eyes were fixed on his men, but his thoughts raced ahead to the rich land where he was bound. In his mind's eye, he could see the mule train coming to meet him when he reached land. He could see it snaking its way along the golden road from Panama to the seaport of Puerto Bello. He could almost feel the smooth, hard gold in the packs of the donkeys' backs. His eyes narrowed greedily. "Gold," he mumbled. "Think of trading 20 ponies for their weight in gold." He clasped his hand behind him and resumed pacing and muttering. "The Vicary of Peru sets great store by the ponies, and well he may. Without the ponies to work the mines, there will be no more gold." And then he clenched his fist. "We must keep the ponies alive." His thoughts were brought up sharply. That shrill horse call. Again it filled the air above him with a wild ring. His beady eyes darted to the lookout man in the crow's nest, and then the men on the deck. He saw fear spread among the crew. Meanwhile, in the dark hold of the ship, a small bay stallion was pawing the floor of his stall. His iron shoes with their sharp rims and turned-down heels threw a shower of sparks, and he felt strong charges of electricity. His nostrils flared. The moisture in the air, the changes and charges of electricity, these were storm warnings, things he knew. Some inner urge told him he must get his mares to high land before the storm broke. He tried to escape, charging against the chessboard of his stall again and again. He threw his head back and bugled. From stalls beside him, and from stalls opposite him, 19 heads with small pointed ears peered out. 19 pairs of brown eyes whitened. 19 young mares caught his anxiety. They, too, tried to escape, rearing, plunging. But presently the wild animals were no longer hurling themselves. They were being hurled. The ship was pitching and tossing and rising with the swell of the seas, flinging the ponies forward against their chessboards, backwards against the ship's side, forwards and backwards. A cold wind spiraled down the hatch. It whistled and screamed above the rough voice of the captain, and it gave way to only a deep flump of thunder. The sea became a wildcat now, and the galleon her prey. She stopped the ship and drove her off course. She slapped at her, rolling her victim from side to side. She knocked the spars out of her and used them to ram holes in her side. She clawed the rudder from its sternpost and threw it into the sea. She cracked the ship's ribs as if they were brittle bones, and then she hissed and spat through the seams. The pressure of the sea swept everything before it. Huge baskets filled with gravel for ballast plummeted down the passageways between the ponies, breaking up the stalls as they went by. Suddenly, the galleon shuddered. From bow to stern came an endless rasping sound. The ship had struck a shoal, and with ripping and crashing of timber and the hull cracked open. In that split second, the captain, his men, and his live cargo were washed into the boiling foam. The wildcat sea yawned. She swallowed the men. Only the captain and 15 ponies managed to come up again. The captain bobbled alongside the stallion and made a wild grasp for his tail, but a great wave swept him out of reach. The stallion neighed an encouragement in his mares, who were struggling to keep afloat, fighting with the wreckage and the sea. For long minutes they thrashed about helplessly, and just when their strength was nearly spent, the storm died as suddenly as it had risen. The wind calmed. The sea was no longer a wild cat. She became a kitten, fawning and lapping around the pony's legs. Now their hoofs touched land. They were able to stand. They were scrambling up the beach, up on the Osaku Beach, that long, sandy island which shelters the tidewater country of Virginia and Maryland. They were far from the mines of Peru. How you doing, yo? You liking it? All right, chapter 2, the island of wild things. The ponies were exhausted, and their coats were heavy with water, but they were free, free, free. They raised their heads and snuffed the wind. The smell was unlike that of the lowland moors of Spain, but it was good. They sucked in the sharp, sweet pungence of the pine woods, and somewhere, mixed in with the piney smell, came the enticing scent of salt grass. Their stomachs were pinched with hungers, but the ponies did not seek the grass at once. They shook the water from their coats, and then they rolled back and forth in the sand, enjoying the solid feel of the land. At last the stallion's hunger stirred him into action. He rounded up his mares, and with only a watery moon to light the way, he drove them through the needle-carpeted woods. The mares stopped to eat the leaves of some myrtle bushes, but the stallion jostled them into line. Then he took the lead. So direct was his progress that it seemed almost as if he had trodden here before. Through bramble and thicket, through brackish pools of water, he led the way. The moon was high overhead when the little band came out on the grassy marshland. They stopped a moment to listen to the wide blades of grass whisper and seek into the wind, and to sniff the tickling smell of salt grass. This was it. This was the exciting smell that had urged them on. With wild snorts of happiness, they buried their noses in the long grass. They bit and tore great mouthfuls, frantically, as if they were afraid it might not last. Oh, the salty goodness of it! Not bitter at all, but juicy sweet with rain. It was different from any grass that they knew. It billowed and shimmered like the sea. They could not get enough of it. That deliciously salty taste. Never had they known anything like it. Never. And sometimes they came upon tender patches of La Spirita, a kind of clover that grew among the grasses. The ponies forgot the 40 days and 40 nights in the dark hold of the Spanish galleon. They forgot the musty hay. They forgot the smell of bilge water, of oil, and fishy odors from the cooking gallery. When they could eat no more, they pawed shallow wells with their hooves for drinking water. Then they rolled in the wiry grass, letting out whinnies of happiness. They seemed unable to believe that this island was all their own. Not a human being anywhere, only grass and sky, and the wind, and at last they slept. The seasons came and went, and the ponies adopted the new world as their own. They learned how to take care of themselves. When summer came and with it the greenhead flies by day and the mosquitoes by night, they plunged into the seas up to their neck in the cool surf. The sea was their friend. Once it had set them free. Now it protected them from their fiercest enemies. Winter came and the grasses yellowed and dried, but the ponies discovered that close to the roots it was still green and good to eat. Even when a solid film of ice sealed the land, they did not go hungry. They broke through the ice with their hooves or went off to the woods to eat myrtle leaves that stayed green all winter. Snow was a new experience, too. They blew at it, making little snow flurries on their own. They tasted it, and it melted on their tongue. Snow was good to drink. If the Spaniards could have seen their ponies now, they would have been startled at their changed experience. No longer were their coats sleek. They were thick and shaggy as the coat of any sheepdog. This was a good thing. On bitter days, when they stood close huddled for comfort, each pony could enjoy the added warmth of its neighbor's coat as well as his own. There were no wolves or wildcats on the island, but there was deep, miry mud to trap creatures and suck them down. After a few desperate struggles, the ponies learned how to fall to their knees, then sidle and wiggle like crabs until they were out of it. With each season, the ponies grew wiser, and with each season, they became tougher and more hardy. Horse colts and fillies were born to them. And as the horse colts grew big, they rounded up mares of their own and started new herds that ranged wild as the wind and the sea that had brought them there years ago. Years went by, and more years. Changes came to Askew. The red man came. The white men came. The white men built a lighthouse to warn ships of dangerous reefs. They built a handful of houses and a white church. But soon the houses stood empty. People moved their homes and their church to nearby Chincoteague Island, for the Askew belonged to wild things, to the wild birds that nestled in it, and the wild ponies whose ancestors had lived on it since the days of the Spanish galleon.